Hello, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. Today is a day that we remember Martin Luther King Jr. His name and his image are memorialized in granite and in gold and silver upon coins. And today he is remembered in a holiday here in the United States of America, but certainly he is also revered around the world. Though he was not a perfect man, Martin Luther King Jr. stood for something right and just that was really long overdue at the time of his great speech upon in front of the Lincoln Memorial. For it was his actions that directly led to important pieces of legislations such as the Voting Rights Act of 1965 for every American citizen, no matter their race, color, or creed. And just a year before then, he was instrumental in prompting the Congress to pass landmark legislation known as the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So very, very influential man in our time. He gave a speech that I referred to earlier that I think is worth reading some excerpts of, because I think it kind of helps us to grasp kind of what his philosophy was of equality. And it's referred to and directly related to the Emancipation Proclamation that was signed by President Abraham Lincoln in 1863. And so the momentous decree came as a great beacon of light for hopes to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. Came as a joyous daybreak to end a long night of captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. And 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. And still languishing in the corners of American society, finds himself in an exile in his own land. And so we've come to the nation's capital to cash a check. It's obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as the citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. And he refuses to believe that there's a bank of injustice is bankrupt. The bank of justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity in this nation. So we've come to cash this check. A check that we give us upon the demand of riches and freedom and the security of justice. And there's a sense of urgency. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of this moment. The sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. But there's something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness or hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. And it's quite fascinating. And he says a marvelous new militancy that has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And that is so true. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must take the pledge that we shall always march ahead. I say to you today, my friends, So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia and the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.